Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Justice has spoken today and clouds of untruth are dispelled. A government branded illegitimate and alleged to have been stolen by thuggery has been vindicated by the highest court of the land. Maharashtra Chief Minister Eknath Shinde and his deputy Devendra Fadnavis can now rule as custodian of people's mandate, which follows from a dramatic series of events starting Shinde's group breaking away from Uddhav's Shiv Sena, citing his poor leadership. But Uddhav Thackeray refused to acknowledge disintegration of his own party and chose to paint Shinde as a usurper and backstabber instead. Despite the Constitutional Court's verdict, Uddhav continues to play the victim card and lays an automatic claim to his father's legacy. On the other hand, Eknath Shinde and Fadnavis claim to be the real proteges of Bala Saheb's Hindutva and his legacy. They summed it up today by saying Uddhav quit ideology for power and has no right to speak on morality. Illuminated in the light of the Constitutional Court's judgments. Let's first listen in to the Chief Justice of India, D.Y. Chandrachud, who today observed that the courts cannot reinstate a Chief Minister when he has voluntarily resigned and left the field of play for the other players. Listen in.
This argument does not account for the fact that Mr. Thackeray did not face the floor test on 30 June 2022 and submitted his resignation. This court cannot quash a resignation that has been submitted voluntarily. Had Mr. Thackeray refrained from resigning from the post of the Chief Minister, this court could have considered the grant of the remedy of reinstating the government headed by him. The order of this court dated 29 June 2022 held that the outcome of the trust vote to be conducted on 30 June 2022 shall be subject to the final outcome of this batch of petitions. Since the trust vote was not held, the question of it being subject to the final outcome of these petitions does not, therefore, arise.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, the court's verdict has come as a shot in the arm for the Shinde Sarkar. Eknath Shinde and his deputy Devendra Fadnavis have hailed the court's decision and called it a victory of Bala Saheb's vision, the Shiv Sena and the people of Maharashtra. Listen in to what they had to say after this so-called favorable order from the Supreme Court.
ये सरकार जो है हमने गठित किया हुआ शिवसेना भाजपा का वो कानूनी तौर से घटनात्मक दृष्टि से योग्य है, इसमें शिक्कामोर्तब हुआ है। अब घटना बाह्य बोलने वालों को ये सुप्रीम कोर्ट के निर्णय ने काल बाह्य कर दिया है। उनको अभी अगर निर्णय को मानते होंगे तो हम लोग तो निर्णय को मानने वाले लोग हैं।
सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने यह कहा कि स्टेटस को एंटे नहीं किया जा सकता। उद्धव ठाकरे इन्हें वापस मुख्यमंत्री नहीं बनाया जा सकता। जो उन्होंने मांग की थी उनके पिटीशन में, ये बहुत स्पष्ट रूप से उच्चतम न्यायालय ने कहा है।
Meanwhile, after the court verdict, Uddhav Thackeray slammed Shinde and said that he must resign on moral grounds. Listen in to that charge.
ठीक है, कानूनी तौर पर मैंने इस्तीफा दिया, शायद गलत हो सकता है, लेकिन नैतिकता अगर देखें तो जिन लोगों को मेरे पिताजी ने, मेरे पार्टी ने सब कुछ दिया, वो लोग उठकर मेरे ऊपर उंगलियां उठाए, तो उनके लिए मैं मेरा विश्वास या अविश्वास क्यों जताने की कोशिश करूं? तो ऐसे लोगों को अधिकार ही नहीं है मुझे सवाल पूछने का। जिन लोगों ने मेरे पार्टी से सब कुछ लिया और गद्दारी की, तो गद्दार लोग मेरे ऊपर अविश्वास लाए और उसका मैं सामना करूं, कैसे हो सकता है? ये तो गद्दार लोग हैं। आज तो कोर्ट ने कहा, और मतलब कोर्ट ने गद्दार नहीं कहा, लेकिन ये सारी बातें हैं। आज तो मतलब महाराष्ट्र में अब सरकार ही नहीं है। नैतिकता तो अभी जैसे मैंने नैतिकता का पालन किया, तो अगर इस मुख्यमंत्री में जरा भी कोई नैतिकता होगी तो मुख्यमंत्री और उप मुख्यमंत्री ने इस्तीफा देना चाहिए, जैसे मैंने दिया।
Number one, the whip by the so-called Shinde faction was held to be illegal. Number two, the recognition of that illegal whip by the speaker was itself illegal. Thirdly, the speaker's recognition of the entire Shinde faction was held to be illegal. And finally, friends, the entire governor's decision has been declared illegal on the ground that it lacks relevant objective material.
Times Now also spoke to the then governor Bhagat Singh Koshyari, who said that he still thinks that his decision was right. Not to forget, the top court had even questioned the speaker's decision to appoint Bharat Gogavale of the Shinde faction as the whip of Shiv Sena and had called it illegal. The ball is back in the speaker's court, who says that a decision will be taken soon. Listen in.
जब सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने कह दिया कि शिंदे का शपथ लेना सही था, तब शिंदे जी ने कोर्ट ने कह दिया है कि जब उद्धव जी ने इस्तीफा दे ही दिया तो उसके आगे तो कोई कुछ किया ही नहीं जा सकता। राज्यपाल के नाते मेरा ये कर्तव्य था कि कोई इस्तीफा दे रहा है तो मैं उसे स्वीकार कर लूं। तो उसको स्वीकार करके मैंने कौन सी गलती की है और फिर सवाल ही क्यों आगे उठा रहे हो? सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने खुद जब कह दिया है कि जब उन्होंने त्यागपत्र दे दिया है तो उससे आगे कुछ किया ही नहीं जा सकता।
And that brings me to the legitimate question on the NewsHour tonight. Maha mandate stolen or lost? That's the question, and that's the debate coming up on the other side. And joining me on NewsHour Direct tonight is Mr. Mukul Rohatgi, former Attorney General, who's going to break down the Supreme Court judgment on the Maharashtra government case. Thank you for joining me, Mr. Rohatgi. Very complicated case before the Supreme Court. The judgment is finally out, and it clearly shows that the governor was in the wrong when the decision to disqualify or call for a floor test in the Uddhav Thackeray Sarkar case was taken. What does this mean for the office of the governor?
Now it is very clear that the court has said that the action of the governor was not correct in ordering a floor test. Now whether it is correct or not correct, the fact remains that Mr. Thackeray resigned before biting the bullet. Now if you voluntarily resign, then you can't go to the court and say that you restore my government. That is the bottom line of this case. And that is what the court ultimately said. If you have resigned, how can we even ask you to be put back when you did not bite the bullet?
So are you saying it was Uddhav Thackeray's biggest mistake to resign before the floor test? He should have stuck on even when he knew that the majority of the MLAs had gone to the Eknath Shinde faction?
See, it's like this. Normally when you know that the odds are stacked against you, you don't take the test and you may resign. But here you were saying that the governor was wrong in ordering a floor test. If he was wrong in ordering a floor test, you should have taken the floor test and then said, well, I had no option but to take the test because it was a directive and that directive was wrong. If the court found that the directive to be wrong, then the taking of the test would not have come against Mr. Thackeray. It's as simple as that.
So Mr. Thackeray should have stuck on to show that he was confident. But clearly the fact that it was an intra-party issue, and the Supreme Court is very clear in its judgment when it says that the governor should not have gotten into the intra-party differences that were taking place between the Uddhav Thackeray faction and the Eknath Shinde faction. So the governor was morally wrong, or is he really wrong? Where does this judgment really take us in the understanding of how floor test should take place?
See, Navika, a floor test takes place when the opposition challenges the party in power that you have lost majority. That is how it is traditionally done. If there is an internecine fighting between some members of a party, then certainly the governor has no role to come in and then start saying, then do this and do that.
Okay.
Therefore, the action of the governor has been rightly criticized by the Supreme Court. I would not say it's an immoral decision of the governor. It is a wrong decision of the governor. Every day people take wrong decisions. Courts take wrong decisions. Even Supreme Court takes wrong decisions and corrects itself. Now that the judgment has come, it will be a guidance to future governors that please don't meddle or intermeddle in internal party politics.
So in this specific case, Mr. Mukul Rohatgi, am I right in understanding that the Supreme Court's judgment is merely a theoretical judgment that lays down the rules for the future as far as the present is concerned? Because the dice has been cast, nothing can change, and therefore everything that has been said is actually some gyan in simple layperson's language.
Well, well, you are right in some sense. Let's not call it theoretical. It is a judgment on the facts of this case, but the judgment is such, or the scenario was such, that you cannot restore status quo ante, as to which means restoring the position what it was 1 minute before Mr. Shinde resigned. That is not possible. It is unfortunate. He should not have acted the way he did. Is now a lesson for the future, whether governor, whether speaker, whether chief minister, whether whip, or whether the MLAs. I mean, that's how most judgments are. Once the event is over, not very easy to put back the whole thing.
So do you think the fact that the Election Commission has been given a free hand with some advice on how symbols should be dealt with, the speaker can take a call on the disqualification notices now? How would you look at this judgment? Is it in favor of Eknath Shinde and the BJP combined, or is it really only a judgment that puts a rap on the knuckles of the governor's office?
Well, Navika, no, I don't think it's a case of a rap on the governor at all. The decision may be wrong, it can still be bona fide, and it doesn't seem to be a malafide decision. Now, as far as the Shinde group or the Thackeray group is concerned, I think it's a mixed bag. Mr. Thackeray has some brownie points by saying, well, the order of the governor was wrong. Had you stuck on and taken the test, maybe you could have got back your post. That is one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is, whatever has happened in the past, Mr. Shinde and the BJP combined has gone through and has escaped. So once it has escaped, it will continue to be a stale government. The speaker will take a call. The issue of disqualification takes time to decide. Can't be decided in 1 day, 1 month, or 6 months. That disqualification is then subject to a petition in the High Court, etc., etc. If that was to take time, by that time we will be on the cusp of the national elections.
And the Maharashtra elections. So once again, Mr. Mukul Rohatgi, it's a lesson for the
Obviously,
future.
I mean, that's what I meant. National and Maharashtra. So more or less they have escaped. More or less they have escaped from the guillotine and gone through. And the government, as they say in Hindi, Jo Jeeta Wohi Sikandar. So it's something like that.
So Jo Jeeta Wohi Sikandar, Shinde, Fadnavis Sarkar जीता इसलिए सिकंदर, उद्धव ठाकरे डर गए इसलिए आज लूजर हैं?
I think so in the current reality of the situation. I think so.
But there is no morality in political situations of this kind, Mr. Rohatgi, either for political parties or the governor's office. You don't see any question or any erosion in the moral standards and the moral compass?
See, Navika, political parties left the issue of morality many years ago. Today the struggle is कि भाई कुर्सी चाहिए, गद्दी चाहिए. And once you get a kursi or a gaddi, you try and retain it by means which may be legitimate, may be illegitimate. The courts come in when it is illegitimate, but there is no concept of morality in today's politics in this country.
Well, clearly, as far as the moral compass is concerned, Mr. Mukul Rohatgi says, well, morality is completely out of fashion in present-day politics. Thank you very much, Mr. Mukul Rohatgi, for joining me on the NewsHour tonight and calling a spade as always. That was former Attorney General Mukul Rohatgi. And introducing the panel for the debate on the NewsHour tonight, joining me tonight, Ratan Sharda, author. Also joining me, Ishkaran Bhandari, advocate. Sajid Supariwala, Shiv Sena leader from the Uddhav Thackeray faction. KJ Josemon, senior leader and former national secretary of the NCP. Lokesh Jindal, leader of the Congress party. But my first question goes to Nalin Kohli, national spokesperson of the BJP and an advocate himself. Nalin Kohli, many questions are being raised about the morality of the government in power of Eknath Shinde and Devendra Fadnavis. The Supreme Court has called foul the governor's intervention, but at the same time, since Mr. Uddhav Thackeray resigned even before the floor test, clearly no change in government can take place. So do you think this is a moral letdown and a practical victory for the BJP, Shiv Sena, Eknath Shinde faction?
Navika ji, there is no moral issue here, and let me answer it straight. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Uddhav Thackeray lost his majority. That is the reason why he chose to resign, because he knew he was losing the floor test. Now, if I give an example from, say, criminal law, just as an example, that if someone is innocent until you are presumed guilty, the court at the end of it will pronounce you are guilty or not guilty. If you are guilty, there will be a punishment. If you are not guilty, you are freed. So in this case, what is the final judgment? The final judgment does not change a prayer or an expectation of Mr. Uddhav Thackeray that he would be reinstated. He resigned because he had no numbers. Assume he had not resigned and there was a floor test. He would still have not had the numbers. And the Supreme Court has not found anything faulting with that approach, because democracy ultimately functions on the floor test, on the numbers. 100 and plus BJP, plus the breakaway faction of the Shiv Sena, which is the real Shiv Sena if you look at it from the symbols perspective, plus others. Now the second is about the governor. The comment of the Supreme Court is with regard to the governor and the party. It is not with regard to the assembly and the floor test and the government formation, where the Honorable Supreme Court has found the governor to be correct in installing Mr. Eknath Shinde and denying any relief to Mr. Uddhav Thackeray. Now, Mr. Uddhav Thackeray couldn't expect that the Honorable Supreme Court will reinstate him when he himself resigned, or in the alternative, had he stood for a floor test, had been defeated. So in either case, there was to be a change of government. That change of government has taken place. Mr. Shinde is the Chief Minister. He is not being unseated by the Honorable Supreme Court. The action of the governor in installing finally after the floor test Mr. Shinde as Chief Minister is the correct decision. With regard to the materials before the governor, what the Honorable Supreme Court says that based on the materials they see, it was not, in a sense, the governor should not have been involved in the party issue. But if you divorce that party issue out also, at the end of the day, the legislative part of it and the government formation part of it is correct. So there is no question of morality or an argument of morality, because if the argument of morality is to be taken, then Mr. Uddhav Thackeray will have to answer first. Why did he walk out of the alliance of the BJP and go into the arms of the Congress party?
All right, fair point. Fair point. Morality question was settled the day Mr. Uddhav Thackeray did not allow the BJP to form a government despite the fact that it was the single largest party. So let me ask Mr. Sajid Supariwala. Mr. Sajid Supariwala, the question is, can Mr. Uddhav Thackeray be reinstated? No, he can't, because मैदान छोड़ के जो भाग गया उसको आप वापस गेम में कैसे ला सकते हैं? Ultimately, it boils down to just that as the bottom line. How do you respond to that?
First of all, I would like to thank you to take my opinion on this, because the gentleman who was speaking just before me, let me tell you one thing before I start, and that is that morality is definitely, it is an issue of morality and nothing else, and democracy and constitution. we see, and all the people of Maharashtra mostly, they see, and that will be proved on the floor test, which will be the real floor test, will be during the elections when all the people will be voting for Uddhav Balasaheb Thackeray only, and you will see the results very soon, inshallah, whenever it happens. Secondly, my talk about morality and democracy and constitution. What has been democratic in this? Just tell me. Somebody backstabbing your own aide, backstabbing you and going away, deserting just because of some...
But you backstabbed the BJP.
Some fear.
You backstabbed the BJP.
That does not call... Ma'am, Navika ji, nobody backstabbed BJP, whatever. We'll go back now. It will again come to the same issue that BJP had promised 2.5 years of chief ministership and 2.5 years of chief ministership. So we will not go back there because they had backed out. They were the real ones.
So then you can't go back to the position. You can't go back to the position then when Uddhav Thackeray had resigned even before the floor test. Wahan bhi to piche nahi ja sakte, and that is the question. That is the question I want to take to Mr. Ratan Sharda, who's smiling broadly. Mr. Ratan Sharda, morality ka sawal, I think as Mr. Mukul Rohatgi just said, morality in politics issue was settled several years and decades ago. Morality to kuch rahi nahi thi from Narasimha Rao time when governments when votes were bought by MPs, JMM case, you know all of that. So morality never existed in politics. Today, do you agree? I'll come back to you, Mr. Supariwala. I'll come back to you. This is not a speech. This has to be a debate where you get limited time. So make your best argument first and then I'll come back to you. Ratan Sharda ji, morality issue already settled. Practically, it is what Nalin Kohli says. Eknath Shinde and Fadnavis continue to stay in power as the government. Uddhav Thackeray can't come back because he had left his seat, resigned his seat even before the floor test. So who do you see this as a victory for? Uddhav on the morality question or Shinde on the survival of the government question?
Navika ji, I have to disclose something because this cry of morality and shaheed hone wali baatchein will go all through the election. I was sitting in a TV studio when the results of the last assembly election came out. BJP Shiv Sena alliance with full majority, and they were, we were talking to each other, and suddenly the Shiv Sena guy says, "We don't know, we will decide later on." And the NCP guy smiled broadly. He said, "We will decide later. We cannot say anything now." This was on the eve of election result itself. Having done that, disclosed their own intention at that time, that today to talk about 2.5 hour का वादा था, 2.5 year का वादा था. भाई साहब, मैं स्टूडियो में था, आपका NCP वाले भी बैठे थे, शिवसेना वाले बैठे थे. I can take you back to the recording studio, show you that particular bite. So you already had intentions of backstabbing BJP. You fought with BJP, you failed to honor yourself because you wanted immediate results. You went with a party for which your founder fought for years saying, "I will not talk to Hijra."
Let me speak, Mr. Sharda.
No, don't.
Mr. Sharda.
In your time, Mr. Supariwala, you want to rebut him, I'll come back to you, but hold on for your time.
Correct his sentence. NCP had invited, when they called up Ajit Pawar ji to form a government, was that not backstabbing? Was that not unconstitutional?
Arey bhai, I am talking of the very day when the results came.
But lying to a party, and backstabbing.
I have proved you wrong.
It is not about shouting. I am just putting my words through so that I am correcting you.
I told you.
It is not shouting. I am putting my point across.
Mr. Supariwala, he is saying on the day the results came out, not when Ajit Pawar was contacted, on the day of the results itself, the real intention had been put out in public domain. That is what he is saying.
Let me come to the governor's role.
Yes, Ratan Sharda.
You remember somebody called Ramesh Chandra?
Okay.
Navika ji, would you? You are experienced enough to remember Ramesh.
Mr. Supariwala, you can't keep speaking over everybody. I will have to lower your fader. अरे भाई, मैं आपको समय दूंगी ना.
Quiet. Why, bhai? Why?
You will rebut him.
He has the right to speak when I'm.
No, he has the right to speak because this is a democratic debate, my friend. You will speak, you will rebut him after he finishes speaking. And that's the way the rules of the debate are, and I set those rules, lower everybody's fader except Mr. Ratan Sharda.
Somebody would remember a gentleman called Ramesh Chandra, very good friend of Indraji. He was appointed governor of UP, and we had Ek Din Ka Badshah Mr. Navika Kumar, who was made into chief minister by the Ramesh Chandra's mechanizations. So to say that the governor did this and that, so that also goes out. Coming to the third point, see, they are immature politicians, Shiv Sena. There, Uddhav Thackeray, of course, had no experience. We had somebody like Sanjay Raut who created havoc with the entire alliance and also with Shiv Sena within itself by behaving so autocratically, so boorishly that Sharad Pawar had said, go for the floor test. They didn't listen to Sharad Pawar. So when you don't listen to your partner who has huge experience and you foolishly resign and then expect to be, looked at yourself as a shaheed, I see there is something wrong with the entire thinking. There is moral victory for Shiv Sena, Uddhav Thackeray. There is political victory for BJP-Shinde. Very simple. You must accept it. Only after that you start shouting. And they talk of, letters, they talk of, court says that it was not clearly mentioned that these MLAs wanted to resign. See, you don't go by word, grammatical word of a letter. You go by the spirit. If that was not so, Constitution would not be interpreted every time in a different manner. Because the words have to be looked in with the spirit. Now the difficult part for me is when the Supreme Court says that election commission should not decide just on a legislative party, but on a larger issue. How do I expect ECI with one or two members to go to each district of a particular state and find out whether the party is bigger or the legislature is bigger? All through the history of these legislatures, we always find legislature decides whether rightly or wrongly who is going to form the government. So now to go back to the parties and decide it, there is a confusion. And similarly, there is a confusion about speaker role. Also, you say speaker has a right to decide, but speaker is not allowed to decide. You say that legislature is the party whip rides over the legislature whip. So these are new confusions created by the courts. I hope the 7th Bench looks into it. But to cry hoarse about your immaturity, my dear friend,
Fair point, Mr. Subariwala. Now, what is your objection to the points made by Mr. Ratan Sharda?
Okay, the first point about maturity, don't teach the father what to do, okay? The Balasaheb Thackeray has been a tiger of Maharashtra. His son is the successor. Right. Let me tell you. Now I let you speak. Sharja ji, I let you speak now. Can I speak?
Yes,
Navika ji, can I speak now?
Yes, please, go on.
Okay. Don't teach the tiger how to roar, okay? When the tiger starts roaring, all the small animals will run here and there, helter-skelter. The only problem is that you are trying to tame a tiger, which is not possible. The tiger's time will come. You're talking about morality and constitution, and you're talking about maturity. I told you what the maturity is about. Now I'll come to the main point of morality. Bowing down and lose, not because of running away. Nobody has run away. Uddhav Balasaheb Thackeray left his seat with dignity because he was hurt by his own age. He had been hurt by his own men whom he had nurtured, whom Balasaheb Thackeray had nurtured.
Okay.
BJP is secondary. Right now, the morality was about
emotions have a role to play in legislature? Let me take that question. Let me take that question to Mr. Ishkaran Bhandari, who is an advocate. इमोशनल हो गए उद्धव ठाकरे, चले गए, रो पड़े, मोरालिटी का क्वेश्चन है, his own men had hurt him. Is that at all legal conversation, and was that the question before the Supreme Court today or not? Ishkaran Bhandari, please explain to our viewers.
Navika ji, since we are talking about morality, first 10 seconds on morality. There are some parties which have become an expert on moral victories and practical defeat. I thought it was only happening in elections, but it is happening in court judgments also now. Be that as it may be, on morality, all I would say, if two parties go to election together, a pre-poll alliance, they get votes in that name, but then they shift. Won't morality require either you be with that party or you call for a fresh election so that we the people can then decide whom we are voting for? That would ideally be the morality, but frankly that is not in any state. So for that we have to be very clear. But let us come to the judgment. There are two very big setbacks here. First setback is, which we are not discussing enough, is Election Commission had the power to decide the symbols order, because that was a ground taken that while the disqualification is pending before the Speaker, Election Commission does not have the power to decide. So they had the power to decide. That is the symbol they have allotted. the bow and arrow and the name Shiv Sena, there is only one Shiv Sena now as per the EC order, because that's not been stated. We must need to underscore that. Now the second aspect, Balasaheb Thackeray always fought on the front foot and he fought till the last. Uddhav Thackeray did not decide to fight. He decided to shoot himself in the foot. If you shoot yourself in the foot, you're not a martyr. You are a person who is not practical or who is not a fighter till the last minute. What would have happened at the floor test? People are misreading the judgment, where they believe that if the floor test had happened, he would be restored. If the floor test had happened, the real numbers would have come out, and then the Supreme Court may have decided any which ways. How do we know NCP, how they would have voted? How do we know how Mr. Ajit Pawar would have told his followers to vote? How do we know how Congress would have voted? So let us be very clear. Even if a floor test had happened, we do not know what would have happened. But because the floor test didn't happen, because Uddhav Thackeray resigned, he had no chance of winning this case. They dragged it long enough in the Supreme Court, but the judgment has come out, and it's very decisive on the two things which matter: power of Election Commission as well as non-restoration of Uddhav Thackeray as the Chief Minister.
Well, Mr. Josemon of the NCP, I want to ask you, Mr. Supariwala here says that the real tiger is Mr. Uddhav Thackeray. Well, the question can be asked, why did the tiger leave the battleground? If he left the battleground, even if the Supreme Court had decided in his favor, it couldn't, because there was no government in power because Uddhav Thackeray had resigned. So, well, the party that stays in power is Eknath Shinde along with the BJP, which is why the victory is something that the BJP has got, and the Shiv Sena, the real Shiv Sena, as decided by the Election Commission, pointed out by Ishkaran Bhandari. So the battle is over. Sarkar also, Eknath Shinde and BJP, symbol also with Eknath Shinde. So what is the tiger left with?
Madam, by losing a battle, that doesn't mean the war is over.
That's true.
The real battle is with the people. The people will decide. And the tiger will roar, and the Maharashtra will come back to the Mahavikas Aghadi. And you have discussed two issues, the moral and practical. Now the Shinde faction leader himself has considered that Uddhav Thackeray has won the morality side. Because if there were no moral issues, then the Supreme Court would not have questioned or commended the decision to conduct the floor test. That is number one. Number two, regarding the practical. For some time, 2014 onwards, we are seeing the practical way of government forming. In Madhya Pradesh, BJP lost, but they have made a government. That's a practical thing. That practical thing is a question on our democracy, parliamentary democracy. Wherever every constitutional institutions were trampled, silenced, and disabled. So the practical side is going like that. And one more thing, as far as Maharashtra is concerned, the gentleman spoke some time before representing Shinde faction, said that the NCP leader was having a broad smile in the studio. But when the election result came out, Mr. Sharad Pawar, our president, categorically said, we will sit in the opposition. But when the ruling alliance, then the alliance failed to form a government, we have stepped in and we formed a government. And one more thing I would like to remind you, Supreme Court, the courts can take decision on technical matters.
My friend, Mr. Josemon, you grabbed the opportunity when it appeared, when Shiv Sena went around looking for new partners. You grabbed the opportunity. Well, the BJP grabbed the opportunity when there was a split in the Shiv Sena. So your grabbing opportunity is moral and BJP grabbing opportunity is immoral. How can that be said? Nalin Kohli, are there two yardsticks for morality?
How you can go into such conclusions? BJP organized a split. Engineered a split.
May I just come into that?
BJP engineered. Well, if the Shiv Sena was so strong, the engineering of the split would also not have split the party. So that That is entirely, everybody will try to split you. Your party was also being tried to be split, but it did not split, at least so far. So Nalin Kohli, is Mr. Josemon imagining things?
Somebody doesn't.
All right, Nalin Kohli is responding to you. Nalin Kohli is responding to you, sir. Just a minute. Nalin Kohli.
Navika ji, I think everyone's entitled to take a point to defend something that even if it's unpalatable or doesn't make logical sense. For a minute, I'll build this on 3 points. The first being, the judgment, as I said earlier, does not reverse the government formation of Eknath Shinde ji and Devendra Fadnavis ji. That government is there, which was sworn in by the then governor. That decision is treated correct. Now, through this debate, Mr. Supariwala, Mr. Josemon, all of them are constantly talking of a moral part. So let's pause. You celebrate what you are happy and you call a moral victory. Be happy. The Shinde government with Devendra Fadnavis ji, the BJP and Shiv Sena government has won the floor test, is in government, and that is not being changed. So they can celebrate that. So what's the whole fault about?
My dear,
I mean, we can also settle on this.
Absolutely, absolutely matter settle. Lokesh Jindal.
We will celebrate the reality of what the government has given us.
To keep crying about lost opportunities. Who do you have to blame? You have nobody except Mr. Uddhav Thackeray. If he had the nerve and if he was so confident about his own party, then he should have stayed in power. Why did he resign before the floor test? That is the question that the Supreme Court also deliberated upon and found that the man had resigned and therefore no reversal of power can take place. So the prayer is infructuous.
Navika ji, let us get certain facts straight and understand the context within which Supreme Court delivered its judgment. On 25th of June, Narhari Zirwal, he had issued notices to 16 MLAs, rebel MLAs, as to why they should not be disqualified. They were required to submit their replies by 27th of June. Meanwhile, these 16 MLAs, they took extension from the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court allowed them a time limit at 11th of July. So effectively, during this time period, the Governor Bhagat Singh Koshyari, he had no written communication to exercise his discretionary power. He was still bound by the aid and advice of Council of Ministers, but contrary to that, what he did was he asked Uddhav Thackeray for a floor test. The point is, today, Supreme Court, it observed that this decision of the governor was unconstitutional.
Okay.
He is bound by the aid and advice of Council of Ministers. So he was not right. It was illegal.
Okay.
He was incorrect in asking for a floor test. He should have waited till 11th of July. The point is, before this, before the floor test, Uddhav Thackeray ji resigned. Had he not resigned, today the verdict would have been different.
Absolutely,
so over here,
that is exactly what we are all saying. भाई जो player मैच से भाग ही गया, उसके लिए विनर डिक्लेयर करना तो मुश्किल है. Isn't it not, Mr. Ratan Sharda? Mr. Ratan Sharda.
See, there are two views. One is that if he had got the vote of confidence, he had lost the vote of confidence very clear on the day. So he ran away. Now running away did not help him at all. अरे भैया नोनो आपने बोल दिया कुछ बोला तो बोल दीजिए.
सर मैं कुछ फैक्ट्स और रखना चाहता हूं.
नहीं, I'm short on time. Let Mr. Ratan Sharda respond.
Okay.
Yes.
See, the people are crying about governor's role. 4 BJP governments were thrown out after the Babri, demolition. Only one was responsible in UP. Why other 3 were dissolved? In the history of Congress, maximum number of governments have been dissolved. Did they go by the cabinet letter? The governor dissolved the assembly. Maximum numbers were dissolved during Indira Gandhi's time, during Narasimha Rao's time. Now today we talk about, where is legality and where is morality? I think that is height of hypocrisy, sir, because you are the first culprit all through since independence. So don't talk about that now. Coming to टाइगर रोर करेगा, भाई साहब टाइगर के पिताजी जिनका नाम आप ले रहे हो, उन्होंने कहा था कभी भी कांग्रेस से शरद पवार से खत्म हो जाऊंगा, मैं उनके साथ काम नहीं करूंगा. He used worst abuses for them, and you have been tamed by the NCP and the Congress. You have become secular. You did not allow hoarding, talking about Afzal Khan and शिवाजी. So आप क्या की बात करते हो? आप भगवान की कंपटीशन रखते हो, आप रखिए, लेकिन ये मत किए कि वही शिवसेना है. अब ये टाइगर के स्ट्राइप बदल गए हैं. आपको मुबारक हो. और अभी आपकी लड़ाई आप आधी हार चुके हैं, बाकी
Let me
इलेक्शन में
speak for 10 seconds, I'll reply to you.
Okay, Mr. Supariwala, go ahead.
May I also make a short point?
I need how the tiger is rolling and how it will roar. Let the elections happen tomorrow. We'll show it there. Not debate
Fair
about this
point.
at all.
The new election is a new ball game. It's a new game, and may the best, may the strongest party win. Nobody is doubting that some will improve, some will come down. That chance remains because that game has yet to be played in the present game. Nalin Kohli, in the present game, clearly the Shiv Sena of the Uddhav Thackeray side clearly balled itself out of the game on day one because they were unsure of themselves, and that is the real question, is it not?
Illegal, unwanted,
the beginning of a revolution, and it will happen.
Navika ji, let's look at it from a different perspective. Mr. Supariwala, you are disturbing everybody. Respectfully, sir. I mean, let everyone finish their point and then you can have a point of view. So why do we say that the Uddhav Thackeray faction was unsure? They were sure that they would not pass the test. That is the reason why he resigned. Have you ever heard of someone who has the numbers resigning and not going for the floor test? It's an impossibility. So the Supreme Court's comment, in a sense, has to be also seen from the reality of politics. On the ground, Mr. Thackeray did not have the numbers.
Fair
That's
point.
a fact.
And that is why today, after the Supreme Court, people can talk about moral victories, people can talk about spiritual victories. But the fact of the matter is, on the ground, the Eknath Shinde, Devendra Fadnavis government stays. The rest, of course, is all matters to be looked into for future experience. As of now, clearly, on the ground, it is a victory for the BJP-Shiv Sena combined. And not just that, all those who doubted the fact that even the courts in this country had become supplicants to the government at the center, today cannot use that yardstick, because on two big judgments, there is a clear indication of the courts being absolutely independent. At least democracy is dead is an argument will not found any legs to stand on in the days to come. Thanking all my panelists joining me on debate number 1. On the other side,